Today, we're going to get really advanced with the luminosity mask and the masking engine inside of PhotoRaw 2026. But don't worry, if you are a beginner, I'm going to go through this step by step. And I think you're going to find some value in being able to use the tool in this way. This is not something that I've seen on any other channel here on YouTube. And so I want to make sure that I showcase this for you because I think that this is really, really powerful. And it's the secret sauce that many photographers have been using for a long, long time. And that is luminosity mask. But we're going to use a little trick that we have inside of PhotoRaw 2026. So if you're on an older version, unfortunately, you're not going to be able to do that. Now, if you'd like to pick up PhotoRaw 2026, you can consider using the coupon code FreeWillPhotos20. It is an affiliate coupon. What that means is I make a small commission, but it's at no extra charge to you. It's a win-win and a great way of supporting the channel. Now, I am using the ON1 PhotoRaw 2026.4 release in today's tutorial. So if you don't have that, then you're not going to have the session file to follow along with, but I do recommend that if you are on the 2026 version of ON1, consider updating to the 2026.4 release so you can get the session file. Otherwise, I'm going to recommend that you go and find your own session file so that way you can follow along with today's tutorial. Now, let's go ahead and jump into the computer. So here we are inside of the computer, and as mentioned, I am on the 2026.4 release of ON1, and so I have this home page, and the reason why I wanted to start here is because in order to get to the session file that we're going to be using today, you want to click on Practice Files. And ON1 has provided these to the users, and I think that this is just awesome that we have access to some files to kind of test our editing techniques on. And so the file that we're going to use today is ON1 sample number 5, and that's going to be over here. So I'm just going to go ahead and double click that, and then it's going to move us into ON1 PhotoRaw into the editing workspace. All right. Now, the thing that I want to do today to kind of showcase this is talk about increasing shadow areas in a very, very specific fine-tuned location. All right. And that's where luminosity masks really do come in handy. There's a ton of use cases for the technique that I'm going to showcase right now. But what we want to do today is really just select these shadow areas here on the rocks without having any issue or concern about spilling over into other areas. Now, by default, whenever you start editing photos, they typically say, hey, you need to increase the shadows. And so here we are in the develop module. And if I come over to the shadows and I start to pull those up, yeah, I'm increasing the shadows, but this is a global edit, meaning it's going over the entire image. And your mind of what something is in a shadow may be this area down here, but ON1 is saying, well, we think these trees were also in the shadow. And so it's important to know how to make selections, and that's where the luminosity mask comes in, or really just any mask in particular, or in general, I should say. And so we're going to go ahead and double click the shadow area, reset that, and we're going to come over here to this section called local. All right, mine is the number or the second module. Yours may be somewhere else. Fun fact, if you want to move these around, you can click and drag them. And so now you can see I have local to the second or second to last, but I like to have it right after develop. That's personally where I like to place it. All right. Now, when I click on local, I get a blank slate, and this is essentially the masking module. So if you are familiar with Lightroom and the masking tools that are inside of Lightroom, that's what we are in right now. Okay. And so I'm going to click the plus icon over here on the right side, and I'm going to add in a linear gradient because this is the basic way of how people would typically approach masking in the shadow area, or at least adding a mask to increase the shadows in a very specific area. And so I'm going to go ahead and pull up on the shadows here. And you'll notice I'm only increasing the shadows at the bottom of the image. Now, this looks great, and there's no issues with that, right? If I turn this off, turn it on, you can see it's just increasing the shadows down here at the bottom of the image. The problem is maybe there's certain aspects of the rocks, especially when you want to start building contrast and depth in the image. Maybe you want to select a very specific area of the shadows and then increase that using the shadow slider. All right. And if this sounds confusing, don't worry. This is going to be something that you can follow along with, I promise. So I'm going to go ahead and turn off this adjustment and we're going to get started. So again, we're still inside of the local adjustment section. If I come over here to more and I click the plus icon, the fourth masking tool that's available to us is the luminosity mask. And then I'm going to click on add and it says default. I'm going to click there and it's going to apply a mask to the image. Now, right now, it doesn't do anything. You can't see the mask. So if I press the letter O, well, now I get this overlay. And this doesn't do the best interpretation, or at least it doesn't give the best representation of what the mask is doing. And so we're going to come over to here to our masking properties, and we're going to find this area that says overlay options. And if yours is minimized, just click on it so that way it expands. And then we're going to come down to mode. And if yours is already in grayscale, then don't worry about it. Just leave it in grayscale. But if it isn't, like mine is, then we're going to come down here to grayscale. All right. Don't forget about this. A lot of people I've noticed with the 2026 version, they're forgetting that you can switch the different masking view modes, and there's some benefit to using the color overlay. I'm going to show that here in a little bit, but right now we want to come to the grayscale. Now, I'm not going to go super deep into luminosity masking because I really want to just teach the technique here. But what I will say is everywhere that you see white or shades of gray, that is the level of selection. The more white that you see in an area, the more selected it is. And the less white you see in an area going closer to black, the less selected it is. Okay. And what that means is when I increase, so we're going to take a look at the sky here. Okay. I just want you to pay attention to the sky and also to this mountain with the snow on it. And so as I increase the exposure, you see how the sky is starting to get brighter incrementally, but the rest of the image isn't actually getting brighter. And like the trees, they're not getting that much brighter. And the reason is because the trees are less selected than the sky. They're a little bit darker in their overall selection color, or they're a darker tone. And so the luminosity mask is not selecting those areas. It's only selecting the brighter areas. All right. This is very helpful for us. Now I'm going to go ahead and reset that exposure. And I want to show you some of the tools that we have to kind of manipulate the luminosity mask. All right. And so the first one is here. It's under feather. If I pull this up, you can see that this mask starts to blur. And by the way, if you're not seeing these tools in your masking properties, make sure to just click on the empty space to the right of luminosity, and then it will expand to these three sliders. Now, we're going to skip over the level section for right now because that one can be a little complicated. I only want to show you two sliders in here, but I will make note that the level slider is extremely, extremely powerful. All right. The slider that we're going to use though today to make the selection of just the darkest areas of these rocks is going to be the window slider. And so even though it doesn't look like these rocks are selected in a lot of these areas, because the darker they are, or the darker the area, the less selected it's going to be. And that's why the rocks look like they're gray, which is fine. But if I come down here to the window, I have this bar. The left side represents the darkest pixel or the darkest tones in our image. And then the right side represents the brightest pixel or the brightest tones in our image. If I pull this node on the far right, if I pull it closer to the black one, What On1 is doing is saying, hey, don't select anything that's brighter than a 4, right? Let's just say that this represents everything that has a brightness of 0 to a level of 4. All right. This is the zone system. If you're familiar with Ansel Adams, I know that this is a system that he used. It was very popular. But for today's purposes, all you really have to think is, okay, how much of the darker areas do I want selected? Or how little of the brighter areas don't I want selected? All right. So as I start to pull this down, you'll notice that the rocks, they start to only show in certain areas. There's like a really, really light gray here. All right. And at this point, it can be a little difficult to see what's actually being selected. And so this is where that color overlay really comes in handy. And so we're going to jump to the color overlay. I'm going to come down here to mode and then go to color overlay. And you can see I am now selecting just these darker areas of the stones. And that may be where I want to increase or decrease the shadow, whatever adjustment you want to create. All right. Again, lots of use case for this. And so with this selected, I can pull this in even closer, and you'll notice that now I have just the darkest areas of the image selected. The problem is, if I come back to the grayscale, I also have areas up here selected that I don't want. And this is where the second half of the lesson is going to come in. And it's okay if it doesn't make sense on the first go. Go back, rewatch this content after I show it to you, and then test it out, follow along, try it. I promise once you learn this, you're going to be so thankful that you took the time to do that. So what we're going to do is intersect this area with a brush. All right. And this is just going to allow us to paint in on just the rocks, leaving everything else untouched. To do that, what we'll do is come back over to our masking properties, come over to mask layers. We're going to click the plus icon, and then we're going to come down to brush. And then I'm just going to go ahead and click on add. It doesn't matter which one you select here because that's not the actual mode that we're going to use. Instead, what we're going to do is come back to the brush, click the 3-line menu, and then come down to the bottom. And you'll notice we now have a third option, and it's called intersect. Again, you don't have to worry about what intersect means. Just go ahead and click it, and then nothing happens. And you're probably like, Chris, why did you show me how to do something that does nothing? Well, here's where the power of intersect comes in. As I start to paint over this rock, look, I'm painting in that purple. But if I come over the top of the rock, it's not actually painting in anything in there because it's being restricted by wherever the luminosity mask was at. And so that's essentially what intersect does for us. What it does is it looks at the underlying mask and it says, okay, wherever this is selected and wherever I paint, then that's where the selection will be made. All right. Again, it can be a little confusing, but I promise you, the more you do this, the more you use this technique, you are going to have so much control over your masking tools inside of On1. And it's going to like just change the way that you visualize the light in your images and how you can control it. All right. Now you can see I'm just painting over this rock and I'm adding in only where I want this to be. I may not even want it over the entire rock. But look, I now have this shadow area selected. And so what I can do now is turn off my overlay. So I'll press the letter O. And then I can come down here and I want it to open up the shadows. And so as I start to pull this up, it's a very, very subtle change. But it's a change that the more you do this and the more you start to layer your luminosity mask and the intersecting, you are going to have so much control over crafting the light in your image that you will never look at the light the same in a photo. All right. Now, again, that may have been too small of an adjustment area. And so I can come back to the luminosity mask, come over to the window, and I can start to pull that up. And look at how that's starting to blend and add more into the selected area. So maybe this is the most appropriate window. I now have a lot of natural looking light in the stones without impacting the rest of the image. Now, of course, this is just the beginning of what you can do. So let me go ahead and turn this off and then turn it back on so you can see what's happening. It's a subtle adjustment, but it's an adjustment that's going to help you really take your photography and your manipulation of light in a photo to the next level. Now, if for some reason this starts to look like way too abrupt, I'm just going to like overdo this real quick with the exposure. This doesn't look very natural. All right. And that's where the feathering comes in. So we're going to come back to the luminosity mask. We're going to grab the feather and we're just going to pull that up. And you can see how we start to gain some of that definition back into the rock face there. All right. Now, of course, I wouldn't increase the exposure like that because that's not really working with the shadows, but it is brightening up just the shadowed areas. And maybe, let me just minimize my masking section here. We're going to come over here to structure, and maybe we want to throw in a little bit of structure. And so now I have more definition in just that shadowed area that we increase the brightness on. There are so many possibilities here that you can do using ON1 Photo Raw intersecting mask with luminosity mask. So if you got questions, please leave them in the comment section below. If you want someone to help teach you how to use the software and, just kind of come alongside, you got specific questions you want to ask, consider signing up for a training call with me. A link for that can be found in the description box below. If you want to save money when picking up ON1 Photo Raw, maybe you're switching from Lightroom or another photo editing application. If you want to save some money along the way, consider using the coupon code FreeWillPhotos20. It'll save you some money at checkout. I do make a commission from everyone who uses it, but it's at no extra cost to you. So with all that being said, I hope you found this video helpful. And until next time, I want you to stay inspired and keep creating. Peace.